And you look at that and you say, well, then that's not fair. If he created both, well, I'm stuck in the middle then. And the point is this, yes, this world today is God's game, but we're on the other side of the cross. So in other words, we know who wins. And if we're in this room, we should have the skills, the tools, the strength to be on the winning side. Now, we don't feel like we win every single battle, but we know we're going to win the war. So let's figure out some of the strategies of Satan. Let's figure out how this all started so that we can at least walk through this feeling like it's a little bit more fair for those of us who do know the Lord, because he has covered us in his blood. He has given us salvation. He has said there's victory through his name. We have a Bible that is his voice speaking to us. We have the Spirit of God that lives within us. And we know that 100% of us will die. So we all know that it ends all the same way. It's just how are we going to get there? And then what are we able to receive and even achieve when life is over? And Michelle, I think about Steve right now. Like you said to me right before Bible study that he's kind of in that in-between state, that you don't know if he's talking to the Lord or if he's talking to you. And she said it's that spiritual place where he keeps saying, are we ready to go? Are we going to go now? And she said, I know what he's saying. She said, he's ready to go. He's ready to go to heaven. And she said, I don't know if everyone always gets it, but she's taken care of many people in that hospice place. And there is that, like, how much of the world are you in versus the afterlife are you now in? And at some point, we have to understand that as Christians, we have an awareness of not only the afterlife but the present life right now and what's going on in a spiritual realm. So I want us to open up to Genesis chapter 3, and we're going to go back to the beginning of where the temptation all started. We'll probably, we'll start in chapter 2. So Genesis literally is the first book of the Bible, the beginning. Genesis means the beginning. And the last book of the Bible is, Revelation. And Genesis and Revelation are very close in content a lot of time. A lot of Revelation is quoted from Genesis, which I think is just awesome. I love that there's a beginning and an end, and somehow it becomes a circle. Okay, so chapter 2, we're going to look at when man was formed, and it's verse 7. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed in his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being. And the Lord planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground the Lord God made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. All right, so here's my little board, which Calva was so sweet to find for me. It's not really a whiteboard, so I'm hoping my pens work. I will use the other one. Please Sharpie. Okay, so this is Genesis 2:7-9, and we have Adam, and he is put where? In the garden, right? And in the garden, every tree is good, and there's 2 trees in the midst of the garden. That's not a tree. There, this is a tree. There, okay, I'll use that. Okay. There's a tree. I've never made pine trees before. That's okay. All right, there's a tree, and there's a tree. They look like arrows. So, one tree is what? we'll make the circle because it's like a halo. The tree of life. And what's the other tree? Knowledge of what? So what did Adam not have? He did not have knowledge of good and evil. He didn't. You know what I mean? It was all good. It's not, and like, that's not fair. Like, right there, that's not, you know what I mean? Like, that's not fair. And life. That's kind of weird if you think about it. Because God breathed into his nostrils, but there was a tree of life. That's weird too. Because he is living, right? Okay, so let's keep going, because that becomes significant. All right. So verse 15. Then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to do what? Work. Tend it and keep it. I'm telling you, this whole idea of retirement, tend it, keep it. This whole idea of, I just want to retire. I just want to retire. I don't know why anybody thinks we're going to rest on earth like that. We're going to work. We are put on this earth to work. And someday, if some of us are blessed enough that God says, yes, you're able to retire, great. But I remember when Chuck Smith was thinking of retiring, he was the pastor who just passed away from Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, and I attended his church in high school a lot. And I remember when he was talking about his replacement and that he was going to retire and he was going to step down because he wanted to spend more time with his grandkids. And then his son-in-law decided that he needed to become a missionary in England the year Chuck Smith wanted to retire. So he decided, well, then I'm not going to retire. So he picked it up, and then he said to Brian and Cheryl, okay, you can go to England if you promise me when you move back, you move to Costa Mesa. Because Brian had a church in Orange County. And so Brian and Cheryl said, okay, we promise we'll move back to Costa Mesa. So then it was Chuck Smith's desire. He was going to retire when Brian and Cheryl came back to Costa Mesa. Well, I'm telling you, that was probably 20 years ago. And 3 days that I know of, it might have been the day before, but 3 days before he died, he was still on the radio doing those Bible Answer Man questions.